Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Christina Steeren with Bullseye Investments, where we help busy professionals create a better financial future through apartment investing without the huge time commitment. And today I'm really excited to be able to bring this video to you because it's something I've been wanting to do for a really long time. I have really wanted to talk to you guys about the Private Placement Memorandum. It's also known as a PPM because this is the legal document that you will be reviewing and signing and completing if you're interested in participating in a real estate syndication and investing in one. And it is a massive document. We're talking 150 pages long, no joke. And it details everything. I wish I had an actual example to show to you guys today, but PPMs are confidential, so I can't actually share a real life example of one, but I can talk to you in detail about what things you should expect to see in a PPM and what sort of things you should be looking for within the PPM and what your responsibility as a potential investor is if you are completing the PPM itself. Let's go ahead and get started with a summary of what you should expect to see when you're flipping through this 150-page document. All right, so let's start with what is actually included. What are the sections included within this private placement memorandum that you should be familiar with? Number one, we're going to have a quick summary, and that's going to cover all of the basics of what the investment is, how much the minimum investment amount is, how shares are divided, because you may be placing, $100,000 into this investment, but each share might be worth $1,000, so you're getting 1,000 shares. And that would help to determine your percentage of ownership for things like tax benefits. It's going to cover the distributions and how those are going to be handled, how often you should expect to receive them, and when they anticipate them starting. It's going to cover who is eligible to invest and what the criteria of eligibility is, as well as how the proceeds or your investment are going to be used, like what is the purpose of your investment and how it's going to be used to basically create the business plan. So in a lot of cases, your investment is going to be used for improvements on the property. In addition to this, you'll see something about your voting rights. So if there were a need for voting, it would be just this is going to be a quick summary of what voting rights you have under the company agreement, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So following that initial summary, you're going to have all of your legal disclaimers. And this is a huge section of the private placement memorandum, and it goes into extreme detail about all of those things covered in the summary, all of the specifics, the nitty-gritty little tiny details that are a part of making sure that this is a solid investment for you, but also making sure it is legally sound. So that is something you will definitely want to have your advisors review if you're not comfortable reviewing it yourself, so that you're very comfortable with all of the details associated with a specific investment. Following that, you're going to have information on the sponsorship team, so the managers, the people whose job it is to oversee making sure that that business plan goes from, point A to point B, from paper to reality on the property, so that you know exactly who's in charge and exactly who's involved, and you have confidence in that sponsorship team as well. Following this, you'll see the company agreement. And as I'm sure you're familiar with, in syndications, you're generally investing into an entity that then purchases the apartment complex, and it's a pass-through entity. So you get the same benefits of ownership, but because it's an entity, it has a company agreement. It details who's responsible for what, how any issues will be handled, and basically the protocol for dealing with everything within that entity, so that, God forbid, something happens, we already have a guideline for how to mitigate and move forward. The next section, and sometimes this comes before the company agreement, is your executive summary. Now, your executive summary is going to be very similar to your marketing material or your deal deck. You might have heard it referred to as such, a deal deck. And this is all of the information related really to the business plan and to the plans that your sponsorship team has in place to bring that investment from where it is to where it is creating value for the community, for you as in the investors, for the residents. The last two documents you should expect to see in your private placement memorandum are going to be your subscription documents and your investor questionnaire. Now, these are the two things that you as a potential passive investor are required to complete, because your subscription agreement says, I am interested in investing in this opportunity. I am going to invest this amount of money. And your investor questionnaire is where you show that you are a qualified investor, either a sophisticated investor or an accredited investor. But there are questions that you're required to answer there, so that should anything be audited or any concerns come up, that we can show that you as an investor are not just kind of some random person off the street. You actually know what you're doing. You're aware of different types of investments. You have experience in investing in general, and that you are qualified to be a part of this investment itself. Now that we've talked about the basic categories that you should expect to see within a PPM, let's go ahead and talk about some of the specific key things that you need to be on the lookout for when you're reviewing that private placement memorandum. All right, key things that you should look for when you're looking at a PPM. These are the really important things, and I'm not saying don't look at anything else. I'm saying these are the things you should be able to flip through and really easily see within the private placement memorandum, so that you really quickly can kind of get an idea of what is what before you review it with whoever your advisors are. And we always advise you to speak to your financial advisors, a lawyer, a CPA, whoever it is you need to talk to feel really comfortable making that initial investment. All right, so key things to look for. Number one, total amount of the raise. So this is the total amount the sponsorship team is looking to find from passive investors like yourself, so that they are able to close the deal. And this is important just so that you have an overall idea of how many other people might be participating in the deal if everyone makes the minimum investment, how much money they're going to need. Sometimes speaks to the detail and the scope of work that is required in terms of being able to adequately work through the business plan. And you want to know if any of that money is going towards capital expenditures or towards any of those improvement plans, or if it's just for the close itself. So that's something you may have to ask your sponsorship team about, but having an idea of what the whole raise is makes that a little bit easier. The second thing you're going to want to look for is, what is the minimum investment amount? You may be interested in putting in more than that, but you need to be able to put in at least that minimum investment amount. And so again, that's also going to be on probably the first or second page, and it should be clear, should be kind of separated from everything else, really easy for you to find as an investor. The third thing you're going to need to look for is the equity split and whether or not there's a preferred return. Again, these are all things that are in the first couple of pages because they're really key important things for you as an investor to know about. The equity split is going to say, you as a passive investor will get a certain percentage of the returns, and the sponsorship team, as the managers of the deal, will get a certain percent of the returns. And what is that split? Will you as a passive investor get 70% and the sponsorship team get 30% of the proceeds? Will it be 75 and 25%? What is that? And on top of that, you're also looking to see whether or not there's a preferred return. And that is whether or not you as an investor get a certain percentage before the sponsorship team sees a dime of the proceeds. It's very common to have something like a 70% back to the passive investors, 30% to the sponsorship team split with an 8% preferred return. So the passive investors get 8% before the sponsorship team is allowed to take anything. But again, the specifics of that deal are going to be documented within that paperwork, and that is something you are going to want to look for as a passive investor. Okay, the last thing you're really going to want to be familiar with is where to find your investor summary and the specifics for investing in terms of how you plan to invest. You have the ability in many cases to invest as an individual, to invest jointly with, say, a spouse, or to invest as an entity. And the paperwork that you're required to complete is going to be a little bit different for each of those three avenues of investing. So you want to make sure you know what paperwork specifically is going to be required of you if you choose to invest in this deal and this opportunity in terms of how you're investing, so that you don't lose your spot because you filled paperwork out completely. Remember, a lot of these opportunities are first come, first serve, which means the people who get their paperwork in and their funds wired in are guaranteed a spot. And if you don't get the right paperwork in, you may not be guaranteed a spot. It just depends on the deal and it depends on the opportunity. So those would be my key things that you're going to want to be familiar with where they are within a private placement memorandum, the key things you're going to want to look out for, so that when you do decide to invest, you are completely comfortable and aware of all of the intricacies, but also the overarching information associated with a deal. I hope this was super helpful and that it makes looking through a private placement memorandum a lot easier and a lot less scary when you go to do it for the first time. If you found this helpful, please feel free to share with your family and friends. Hit the like button here on YouTube to let other people on the internet know that you found this video super helpful. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them either below or feel free to email me directly at christina@bullseyeinvestments.com. And there's a dash in there between the bullseye and the investments. And ask, because if you're asking it, 5 other people are thinking it, and we don't want anyone to be confused. We want to help you make this as easy and smooth of a journey as we can. So your question may be a future video. The last thing you can do is subscribe to make sure that anytime we put new content out, you're the first to know. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye.